Let's talk about the components of health. And when I talk about the components of health that you can see on the screen, we can divide health up to into six different parts, if you will. You can see that it's physical health, emotional health, social health, mental health, spiritual health, and environmental health. Now, I like this graphic because it is complete. We in this class kind of pare these down a little bit. Instead of six, we'll combine a couple, and we will focus really on four of them. Not that the others aren't important. It's just that we have limited time, and we really want to kind of focus on the things that are most applicable to this age group. When we use the word health, and when it especially relates to the components, um, what I'm talking about is at any given time, you have a condition, all right? And so uh, that condition is dictated by your physical health, your mental, emotional health, your social health, and your spiritual health. So let's look at that definition of health, or that idea of health, in more detail. As you can see here, most of you have a car. You will have a car soon, and we kind of think of cars as just as this thing um, that gets us around, and we know that it's made up of thousands and thousands of different parts, but we just kind of look at it as the car. Um, this picture kind of represents your health as much like the car. All together, when all those parts and pieces are put together to allow that car to function, it's much like your health. And so there's parts and pieces, components, if you will, of your health that when we put together gives us an opportunity to be healthy. And just like your car, if you need an oil change or your flat tire or you need a part replaced, we have the ability to fix or strengthen a component of our health that might need our attention. Again, while the first slide showed you six components of health, for this class, we pare them down and we focus on these four: physical health, social health, mental/emotional health, and spiritual health. Um, Make sure that, again, that you take a little bit of time to commit these to memory. They will absolutely be on your first test. And pay particular attention to number three, mental/emotional health. A lot of times kids will, when we ask for the four components of health, they'll split those and they'll have mental and emotional as separate components, and then they'll be missing one of the other ones. So please don't do that. When we talk about your physical health, most of the time you guys understand this better than some of the other components. And it's physical education. We have that class for you, and it's to encourage and improve all your body systems working together: your muscular system, your skeletal system, your cardiovascular system, your nervous system. Um, and again, a lot of times kids understand this a little bit more than some of the other ones. Your social health. We're social creatures, and we look for acceptance amongst our peer groups, and we look for acceptance among people. And your social health, as you can see, what's underlined here is really just the ability to interact with people. Um, I think that as teenagers and people in general, we probably have a higher level of social health with people that look like us, that believe the same things that we do. Some of those people that seem to be very similar to us, we kind of gravitate toward those people, and those are our relationships, and that's fine. But a high level of social health is the ability to interact with people that aren't like you, that might not see things the same way that you do. They might have different values, different beliefs, different ideas, and how do we as humans accept those ideas while staying true to ourselves? I think the current political climate in the United States kind of demonstrates this, is that we're very polarized. And if somebody doesn't believe like me, um, look like me, have solutions that I agree with, then we kind of push them aside, and we're unwilling or unable to really listen to them or empathize with them or even converse with them. Your spiritual health. This one's a little bit difficult because to explain, because I know that you've been conditioned. When I say spiritual, most of you think religion, maybe church, and that's part of it for many people. But spiritual health is more broad than that, because there are people that don't have any belief systems when it comes to religion, um, and we need to be recognizing that those people still have a level of spiritual health. We all have an idea of what we're here for. We all are searching for, our meaning. And when you look at the definition here of having compassion and the capacity for love and forgiveness, joy and fulfillment, that transcends all different belief systems. You as an individual, you have your religious faith, your values, your beliefs, your principles, and your morals, and those all define your spirituality, and it's really unique to every individual. We'll see more of this, and I'll spend more time on this as we move forward. Mental and emotional health. When we look at mental and emotional health, we're really looking at being able to recognize your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and express emotions in a positive way. When you look at the way that kids grow up and the way that they are conditioned to behave, oftentimes we don't grow out of those kind of primary behaviors, those behaviors that we demonstrate as kids that get our emotions met. I speak of this to kids, is that when you're a little kid and you don't get your way, you're feeling an emotion, you want something, and so you throw a temper tantrum. And while that might be an appropriate way to express an emotion as a 2-year-old, it really isn't the best way to express your emotions as a 16, 17-year-old. And yet many kids still just continue to do that because it was effective when they were 2, and then they wonder why they might not get the same result when they are a little bit older. And again, we're going to speak about each of these components in more detail. I just wanted to give you an idea of what each of them were, and so that we can start to process, all right, how do they work together? What is the interdependence and independence? I'm going to talk about both those words. I like to give kids the visuals on what it means to, right? So what about the components, and how does that guide or define our health or give us a picture of our health? And so I like the teeter-totter example, the model that we have here. And simply is this, is that health is balance. We have a word in health we call homeostasis, and that is balance. And that's what we're looking for in a healthy individual. It's just a balance between their physical health, their mental, emotional health, their social health, and their spiritual health. Now, any of you that have been on a teeter-totter before, you understand how difficult it is to balance a teeter-totter. If you have 2 kids on either side of the teeter-totter and they try to take their feet off the ground and kind of suspend themselves in midair and have the teeter-totter balance, that's not really easy to do. And so I think that gives you a good picture. Is it possible to always have your health perfectly balanced? And the answer is no. The key is that little swings in balance are okay. Those are normal. What we see a lot of times with kids is these drastic swings. And I use this example, and when I was a little kid, and I'm not always proud of this, but it's just an honest story. I used to like to be the kid that would be on a teeter-totter with his buddy, and then I'd quickly stand up on one side and provide me more leverage as long as I was close in weight as who I was playing with. But by doing so, standing up on one side and pushing my end of the teeter-totter to the ground would have the other end of the teeter-totter up off the ground. And our teeter-totters were a lot longer and higher off the ground when I was growing up than you are now, simply because of safety reasons. And so by standing on one end and my buddy'd be up on the other, there was no way that he could get down. It was really hard to move the teeter-totter unless I chose to move it myself. And of course, I was kind of one of those kids that like to mess around with kids, and so oftentimes I would just jump off my side, and the teeter-totter would just go crashing down, and my buddy would have to deal with that, whacking himself on the ground really hard. And I know it sounds silly, but I think it's a good example of our health. Oftentimes, we just find ourselves in those situations where we make a decision or a choice that just really messes up our balance and causes a huge swing in our health, and then we need to do something pretty significant to try to balance it again. I'm going to give you three different kind of visual representations of health, and the first one again was the teeter-totter. The second one, we've used the Venn diagram before with decision making. And again, this is, if you think of this more as a flower, you understand that a flower has petals. And in this diagram, each component of health is a petal. If a flower is being taken care of, it's healthy, it has nutrients still in the ground, it's watering. Oftentimes, a single petal will shrivel up, fall off, and die. And again, if it's a healthy flower, the flower will regrow that petal, and in time, the flower will be complete again. And that process kind of continues over and over again. Yesterday, we handed out roses for Valentine's Day, and you could see that at the end of the day, a lot of those petals started to wither up. They dried up, and because the roses had already been cut from the stem, there's no way that we could regenerate or do anything to that flower so that petal would return to normal. It would just die, dry up, and fall off. And unfortunately, there are some decisions that kids make that will cause, permanent damage to their health that we can't replace. And it's not fun to think about, but there's also decisions that we make that will just remove our flower from the ground altogether, removing its source of nutrients and vitality, and we know that a flower will die, and there's nothing that we can do about it if we don't provide everything that it needs to stay alive. And unfortunately, again, some kids make those decisions too, and end up having catastrophic effect on their health. The last one is I like this diagram also. It's just like a spoke wheel, and what I'm asking you to consider here is each spoke is independent. And what I mean by that is that if you see the spokes, if your physical health, we can talk about your physical health by itself. We can talk about your spiritual health. We can talk about your social health. We can talk about your mental, emotional health. But as you see on the picture, if one of these spokes are damaged or broken, the wheel will no longer be functional. All right, it'll get bent. There'll be more weight on the other, and the rim will get bent, and we'll have to go back and fix it. We might have to replace the wheel altogether, and it just, again, takes a lot of work to try to get that back. Now, our job is to have habits that keep those spokes, while they might not be perfectly strong, they're strong enough to support the entire wheel so that the wheel won't collapse on itself. On your first test, we're going to ask you to use an example from the movie to talk about these components of health, both independently in relation to each other. And I think the easiest way is if I asked you to identify a way that your physical health can be affected by a decision. And that can be a conscious decision, it could be an accident, it could be just the result of an activity. It doesn't have to be where you're making a decision that will absolutely positively affect your health. It might just happen. So I like this example. What happens if, over winter break, you have a student that likes to ski and they had no intention of getting hurt, but while they were skiing, they had an accident and they ended up breaking their leg. We know that a broken leg is your physical health. Um, your bone that's broken will regenerate. We can have surgery. We can put a cast on it. But over time, we're able to fix the physical aspect, that bone that's broken. Maybe the muscle tissues, the connective tissues around it need to be fixed, but we can do that. However, that physical damage to their body can also affect the other components. And let's say that kid was a basketball player, all right? And again, they went skiing for recreation, ended up breaking their leg, but after break, they were supposed to continue their play with the basketball team. Obviously, with a broken leg, that's not possible. And so, what happens again now is that broken leg uh, will affect their ability to participate with their teammates, be around their friends, committed to team activity is absolutely a social aspect. And again, there's this continued physical consequences, and that is you're not going to be able to run. Your fitness level will go down. It'll take you longer to get back into shape when you do end up being able to play again. So you can see that's physical and social. If you look at the next example, I talked about they feel that they are letting their teammates down and are depressed because of it, especially if you're close to a group of kids and maybe you've played together for many years and this is your senior year and you got a great team and you're an integral part of it, and all of a sudden now you broke your leg and you feel like, man, I should be out there with my teammates, and it can really affect your mental emotional health. You can become depressed. You can become anxious. You have a lot of mental and emotional feelings that you're going to have to process and deal with. And again, because it is a team sport, there's still that social aspect of letting your teammates down and how do you stand up for them and support them. And then the last one is a way for me to try to explain spiritual health, and that is they wonder why it happened to them. This isn't fair. I don't deserve this. They become more frustrated and angry. It's like John Nash in the movie where he's looking for that one thing that distinguishes him great as being great, and he can't find it, and he bangs his head against the glass, breaks the glass, and that has some mental emotional aspect of it, but it becomes spiritual also because his worth, his purpose is tied up in his math and his ability to find something unique. And I think that you can see, again, the interdependence where we can talk about each component individually, but then we can also see how one component can affect another. So again, if you look at this, if I asked you which component of health does this most apply to, most of you would say physical, and that would be a correct answer. That would be an independent. But let's look from a broader perspective. If you go into the fitness center after school and see kids exercising, number one, there's a tremendous amount of social activity going on. Kids are working together, kids are talking, kids are laughing. There's a lot of noise. We know that exercise programs, if you have a partner, the psychology behind it is if you have a partner, you're going to stick with it more than you would if you were independent doing it by yourself. And so there's lots of different things that go socially there. Mentally, emotionally, when we exercise, we produce endorphins, and endorphins are powerful chemicals in our brain that help us to feel a certain way. And for me personally, the most important aspect of working out is to produce those endorphins. I struggle with depression. I have for many years, and instead of using antidepressant drugs, which I believe have a purpose, and for me it was just the ability to use endorphins and exercise to counteract the brain chemical issue that I have. That simply is enough for me. And so again, you can see that physical activity has an effect on your mental, emotional health also. And then your spiritual health, lots of people will, there's exercises like um, some of the martial arts and some of the Asian Eastern philosophies that use exercise as a way to find your inner peace, to connect with a higher power. There's lots of examples where physical and spiritual go together, whether it be meditation, some stress reduction stuff, again, some forms of martial arts that are focused on that. So you can see that we can talk about each individual component, but then start to look at the others. The next two slides are just for you to be able to do that, all right? When you see, marriage, a lot of people say, well, it's mental, emotional, it's love, and that's true, all right? But I think that I would like you to try to see the spiritual, social, and physical aspects of that also, and I think we can make a case that there's interdependence, that each of the components are affected. And then finally, the same thing here when we look at, how people handle their emotions and obviously anger and fighting, and physically you can see that there's a black eye there. Socially, it's really hard to fight with yourself. And spiritually, there's many people. Martin Luther King didn't believe in violence at all, and so there's ways that we can look at each of these situations and see the interdependence or the connectedness between each of these components. In wrapping this up, just a couple different things here. First of all, you're going to have a test next Tuesday. And what you're going to have to do is be able to, again, apply and understand the components of health, the stuff that I talked about today. And we're going to use A Beautiful Mind, the movie, parts of it to kind of relate to that. And also, you need to know your DECIDE model, decision to act or decision to make, explore options, consequences, identify values, decide and act, and evaluate your decision. That's just like your classwork that we completed last week. For your test on Tuesday, tomorrow, and you can start on these today, these are some questions that I ask kids to try to practice before they take their test. These are really, really similar to what you're going to ask to do on your test on Tuesday, so it gives you a great opportunity to try to practice writing out your answers, because you will have to write out some stuff for your test. And so these three questions I strongly encourage you to use in your time tomorrow in class as your study day, to write these out, get feedback from me, prepare yourself so that you will have success on Tuesday.